Brutal weekend to be a top 10 team playing college football. Just finished watching Washington survive against 1-6 Arizona State, North Carolina losing to 2-5 Virginia. You had obviously Penn State losing to Ohio State, Oklahoma winning by 2 at home against UCF. Oregon took a little bit of time, but they did wind up winning by 2 touchdowns against Washington State. And then Texas having to survive a comeback from Houston. It was not a good week to be a top 10 team. I don't know how else to say it. Washington, if Arizona State has a place kicker at all, and it doesn't look like they do, Arizona State wins that game. I mean, it was rough out there. Florida State and Michigan had the best weeks. Florida State had to really fight their way to beat Duke. They need 21. They were losing at the half. They were losing in the fourth quarter, 20-17. But as soon as the Duke quarterback went out, it was 21-0 for the Noles, and they just kind of rolled on from there. USC doing what it usually does against Utah, which is get into the fetal position and lose. Michigan looked good. I knew this was going to happen. Ole Miss, they had to survive a knife fight at Auburn, and they did, but it was a fight. It's just a colossal loss for North Carolina losing like that to Virginia. So, as you look around, there were not a lot of good performances today. There were a lot of it was clear to me how important, if it wasn't already evident in a major way, how critical quarterback play is. Because there was a lot of really bad quarterback play today. Or just bad may be a strong word, but just not really good. I mean, Michael Penix from UW, not good. You saw a tale of two halves for both the Tennessee and Alabama quarterbacks. They were... Joe Milton was on fire in the first half and then just was nowhere to be found in the second half. But Penn State and Ohio State, those quarterbacks are average, I would say. Dylan Gabriel had good numbers, but man, Oklahoma just didn't look good. And I don't know what to say about it. Bo Nix was not the better quarterback in terms of production in his game. It was a weekend where, I think I have to say, you might be glad you weren't playing. I mean, Michigan looked good. That was it. I mean, Michigan, probably LSU. That was, and UCLA in the top 25. I mean, Washington did not score an offensive touchdown and won. USC, just like Caleb Williams looked really bad at the end of that game. It was not a good look for him. Being on the sideline, it just was not a good look. Auburn, I knew Ole Miss would have a hard time with going to Auburn and playing. That game was tied at the half. Ole Miss eventually got up 2 touchdowns, but they only won by 1. I mean, look, it seems to me like right now we're at a situation where it's Georgia and Michigan. I think right after that, I don't know how close to right after is a good question. Are Florida State and Ohio State. Oklahoma is not there yet. They're not where they need to be. They played too many games now that I've seen that they just don't. They struggle too much. Washington, no. Obviously, Penn State lost. Texas narrowly winning. I mean, Washington and Oregon both had huge come down games. I mean, like neither of them were really ready to play. And then North Carolina lost. Just like, so, you're going to have Oregon State is going to be at 11. Alabama is going to be at 10, maybe higher. You could have Oregon State and Alabama in the top 10. It will probably be close to that. Mississippi is going to go higher. Missouri looked good today, particularly in the first half. In the second half, that was not as nice. But Mizzou won't play next week, so they'll do nothing but move up. They may well move. They'll definitely move past USC. They will probably move past Tennessee. They will probably move past Duke. And then they'll sort of nestle in that area there. So they'll be top 15 probably by the time they come to Athens. Georgia is a 17-point favorite against the Gators. So, I mean, you know, that, it is very possible Georgia could end their last 4 games of the season playing on CBS, 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 and CBS. I mean, that they're going to play the Gators on CBS. We already know that. And then with the Missouri game, I mean, that's a doubleheader for CBS. So they'll get picked 1 and 2 that week if my math is right. They're going to take Alabama LSU for the prime time. Georgia Missouri is going to be at 3:00 or 3:30. And then you got the week after that, which is Georgia Ole Miss. Now, I don't know who Ole Miss has between, now and then, but they got Vanderbilt and Texas A&M. That they could lose to Texas A&M, I kind of doubt it. I mean, Texas A&M does not have. I mean, the problem for Ole Miss is they can lose to anybody. I mean, like tonight, they're just not consistent. They don't. I don't know that. It's not a great matchup for them against the Dogs. But when you look out, there was a moment in time where like Ole Miss was throttling South Carolina. And then they came back down to earth. And then, Tennessee was throttling Tennessee was throttling Bama. And then they came back down to earth. And it was like, oh, well, So that week of Georgia Ole Miss, the other games are, I'll only mention the ones that kind of matter at all. Florida, LSU, Tennessee, Missouri, and Alabama, Kentucky. CBS may say, we're just going to take Bama, Kentucky. I could understand that. But, that may be a six-day decision for them. If Georgia's undefeated and Ole Miss is number 10, it's going to be hard for them to turn that game down. So we'll just see what happens. And when you look at this season, the way it's gone for Georgia, the beginning of the year, obviously, not that tough, right? And on paper. And the end of the season is looking much tougher. But you have to, step back. I mean, Michigan is going to have 2 legitimate games. Penn State and Ohio State. That's it. Like, they're not playing anybody else. Their best win right now, and I don't mean this with, like, judgment. They may be the best team in the country. I don't think they are, but they're not number 3. They're number 1 or 2. So, for Michigan, they're just going to have those 2 games. And, I mean, they could lose one of them. I believe they play at Penn State. So, but I don't trust Penn State. Why would you trust Penn State at this point with James Franklin as their head coach? That guy, he cannot get it done. We're 10 years into this thing with that guy. It's not there. Like, Penn State folks who are holding their breath for that guy to get it done in big games are going to end up dying because he's not going to do it. Like, a win against Michigan does not correct all the problems. It does adjust for where you were at, and you could make things very interesting with a 3-way tie in the Big Ten East. But that's just like, that league is bad. It's just those 3 teams. That's it. And now you're going to see with Georgia, I mean, they're going to play, 4 games in a row where they're probably playing ranked teams. Tennessee might not be ranked by the time Georgia plays them. We're going to see. I mean, that was a bad loss for Tennessee today. And what I mean by that is, when you get up like that, you got to close that out. I mean, Tennessee's got 2 losable games before they played at Georgia. They're going to be favored at Kentucky. That's a night game. Tennessee and Kentucky. Tennessee's about a 4-point favorite in that game. Then they're going to host UConn, and then they go out to Missouri. So, they could lose 2 games. They probably won't. They cannot lose again and have any hope of winning the East or winning the league. But it was not a good weekend for some teams. I mean, obviously North Carolina, that was bad. But for the Rebels, I mean, they're right where they need to be. They need Alabama to lose twice. That's probably not going to happen at this stage. I mean, Bama is, looking at LSU. I just don't. they're at Kentucky. Could they lose, back to back weeks? I don't think they can. But I fully expect right now that Georgia and Alabama will be in Atlanta. I think it's a bit more likely that uh, Georgia winds up there, but let's just see. I mean, LSU has 2 losses, one of them to Ole Miss. The one thing the Rebels could really hope for here is that, LSU knocks Alabama out and keeps it clean the rest of the way. I mean, they could. LSU only has 4 games left. That's it. They've got Alabama on the road, Florida at home. That's a tough back-to-back. But, they're off this coming week. It's a mismatch. It's a mishmash in college football right now. I mean, it's hard to trust LSU. It's hard to trust a team that's given up 45, 31, 49, 39. I mean, it's just too many points. 31, I should not probably mention that. But when about half your games, the other guy is scoring 40, man, that's a problem. Like that's a real problem, that you got on your hands. But we're down to one undefeated in the SEC. We got 1 undefeated in the ACC. We got 2 undefeated in the Big Ten. We got 1 undefeated in the Pac-12. We got 1 undefeated in the Big 12. That's it. You got Georgia in the SEC. You have Michigan and Penn State. It's Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten. You got Florida State in the ACC, and you got UW and OU. And that's it. North Carolina decided to just choke on its own tongue. I mean, how do you lose to Virginia? That's just not acceptable in any way. I've not even talked about Clemson yet. I sat there and suffered through that entire game. When I say suffered, that was some bad football. The ACC is a really fun league because you literally have no idea what's going to happen. No clue. You're up 10, and, we've seen back-to-back weeks where Clemson and South Carolina have been up 10 late and lost the games. Late. Not in the third quarter. And there's no explanation, excuse, written word, whatever you want to say to explain or, put in words that they lost that game to Miami, a team with their backup quarterback, and they could not do anything in the first half offensively. Cade Klubnik is bad. He is, at best, an average quarterback. He has consistently just made plays that made no sense to me in that game. And it's not just him. There's a lot of quarterback play that you're sitting there going, what are these guys doing? What are you doing right now? Caleb Williams is a generational talent. He's trying to do way too much at USC. USC is done. They're out. Iowa, they can't score more than two. They can't score more than two touchdowns. They're that bad. They were 6-1 and they lost today. They scored 10 points. Texas surviving, Oklahoma surviving, UW surviving. It was rough out there today. It was some bad football out there, generally speaking. This was not at all the week that you expected. It was not entertaining because it was not well it was not well played. But it sets up for the dogs like this. You beat Florida, you beat Missouri. I just don't know what else. So Michigan and Ohio State will play one another. Florida State and Washington and Oklahoma. I don't know if Florida State's going to eat a loss. There's just not. Miami is not good. And, Florida State's playing at Wake Forest. Pitt, it just looks like they're not going to lose. If they were going to lose, it was going to be at Clemson. They didn't do it. If they were going to lose, it was going to be to Boston College. It didn't happen. If they were going to lose, it was going to be LSU. It didn't happen. I don't know that Florida State will lose. Washington, I don't think you can trust at this point. Yeah, they looked really good at the beginning of the season. Their last 3 games, they've won. They beat Arizona by a touchdown. They beat Oregon, which was a great win by a field goal, and they beat Arizona State on some loopy play. No, they're not trustable. They're just not trustable. They'll lose. I don't know to who. And then Oklahoma, I mean, I think the biggest challenge for Oklahoma is much like Washington in a way. There's games they just don't like. Obviously they survived. It was a great win against Texas, but then to follow that up with a 2-point win against UCF, 2-point win. You had to defend your goal line on a 2-point play, or you're going into very possibly going into overtime, and there's just no telling. So I think Texas is better than Oklahoma, but they lost the game. Now, can they get back into this thing? I mean, Oklahoma has beaten Texas. They've beaten Iowa State. They've got Oklahoma State on the road, a team that is recovered some. They're 3-1 in league play. You got a lot of logjam at the top of the Big 12. Oklahoma does not play Kansas State. The Big 12 is a little bit of a mess. I mean, at BYU, could you lose that game? I mean, probably not. You might, but I mean, BYU lost to TCU. They've lost to Kansas. They're not great. They've not lost a lot of games. I mean, what am I talking about BYU for? I think what we do, as a society is, well, Georgia's number one, but they're not playing like the number one team. Well, then fine, move them to number two. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't move Ohio State over them. I wouldn't move Florida State over them. Obviously not Washington and Oklahoma. Texas has lost, Oregon has lost, everybody else has lost. So by the way we do things, this is just what it is. You win, you go to the top. You lose, you move down. And like for instance, Notre Dame is the highest ranked 2-loss team, and then LSU is right after that. Notre Dame didn't play, so they had a good week. But I mean, gosh, they just USC is just falling like Charlie Brown's rock, or his Halloween rock. It's bad out there sometimes for some of these teams. Like, it does not look good for some of these teams as we head into the turn. But Georgia's got everything in front of them. You look at this schedule. Missouri, they got to come to Athens. Florida, Jacksonville. Ole Miss, they got to come to Athens. Georgia's probably going to conclude the season with 2 games in Athens that are going to be top 15 games. Like matchups against top 15 teams. And everybody's like, well, this is not a good schedule, Dude, it's always a good schedule. It's just a matter of time before who you play matters. I mean, it's always that way when you're good. I mean, the other teams in this league are going to be good. The notion that the SEC is not a good league is, the Pac-12 is falling apart right now. The USC is out. You got UCLA ranked. Utah, who is a good team. Oregon State has played well. Oregon and UW. I may be forgetting somebody, but I don't think so. Then you compare that to, LSU, Tennessee, the Rebels, Alabama, and Georgia. The SEC is probably a little bit more balanced. The Big Ten is drastically top heavy. I don't know, but this is an important stretch of the season for Georgia right now.